Alright, this is our guy with Survient.
Hey, what's going on?
And Chrisylum.
Hey, how you doing?
Right. And, just doing a video today, although we're just talking here, about what is an NPC? Because I've seen this come up a lot recently. I mean in the game term, not the bullshit, alt-right, political, who gives a fuck about that shit. What is an NPC? What is a non-player character? I should start out with Chrisylum first here. So, what do you think an NPC is? How would you define it?
Well, defining anything, I'd probably boil it down by taking away the non-player aspect out of it, and just saying, what is a character? And a character, I would consider any entity, whether a person, being alive or dead, that's a part of telling a story. Basically, could be through memory, could be through dreams, could be through writings, could be through memoirs, could be through anything, but you know them by name, and they have a pivotal part to play throughout the plot.
Alright, yeah, it's pretty good. I do agree with that definition a lot myself. How about you, Survient?
Aren't they the things that you just kill for money? You punch them and candy comes out?
Like River City Ransom?
Yeah, like River City Ransom, definitely do that.
Barf!
So what you're telling me is next time we're playing D&D, I should just go punch all the Modrons, get candy out of them?
That would be called being a murder hobo, is what they call that in the business. But no, for me, an NPC, I do have a distinction how I feel about NPCs, definition-wise, between a video game, tabletop, and other settings where you might have an NPC. So a video game, I have a very distinct idea about that. So like a video game NPC is something that there's no way as a user or a player you have any way that you can take control of that entity. Some games mix that up, games that have multiple parties or multiple people within a party and you control the party. That gets a little tricky because, I've been playing a lot of Kingmaker recently, and you can also have other games as well that have the same idea, Baldur's Gate clone, that kind of thing, where you control a party of characters. And in general, they consider the player character the main character, and then the rest of the party members might be considered NPCs. I don't really buy that. I think in any character you can control yourself for a reasonable or a significant period of time in the game would not be an NPC. It would be a player character. Now in tabletop it gets complicated. Tabletop, I think NPC is less rigid. I think it's more of an idea. You could have it where you've got an ongoing D&D campaign you're running with your friends once a week, once a month, whatever, and they have some NPC characters. Maybe they're part of the party, maybe they're not, and then someone one session doesn't show up, or you have another person in town they want to play, so the DM lets them play as one of those characters. I would still consider that one-off, that person would still be an NPC in that scenario, because for the most part, the majority of the time, no particular player is playing them. But then it gets complicated, because take any game where you have a companion character. You have a player control that companion character, but a lot of times, they have their main person they play as, and then they have that companion to that player. Is that companion an NPC or a player character? It becomes a little complicated.
Okay, that's fair enough. I'm glad you brought up that significant part of time, because I was bringing up, say, Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy, where you can, do a mind control for a small amount of times on NPCs. You'd still consider them NPCs even though you have small control of them?
Of course, yeah. I mean, if... whenever you have any game where, at the end of the game or in future games, if you import your save into a new game and they do a summarization or a recap of all the choices you made and the things that you did, So, like, there was a campaign against a particular politician that your character did whatever they did, and they did some kind of mind control on certain key players. That whole, let's say you dubbed that event XYZ initiative, that would be an initiative owned by that player character. Even though NPCs were involved, the player character was predominantly the one behind those actions. They just involved NPCs.
Okay. Now, could, in a video game sense, an NPC be a dead character that the player never directly interacts with, but learns their story, does things on behalf of them through various means, but never actually interacts with the character itself?
Well, define dead character.
Say the victim in a murder mystery.
Oh, you're talking about, like, what do you call it? Flashback.
It could be, or could be like,
Ghost.
Or let's say like in the Ace Attorney games, you got a murder victim, and you have to figure out what happened to them. Could be only through like journal entries, things like that. Would you still consider the victim, the dead body, a character?
Well, yeah, no. In specific context to the Ace Attorney games, I would definitely consider the victim an NPC in that context.
Okay.
Well, I think from a technical standpoint, I see where you're going with that, but I think when I think of character, I'm kind of looking at it as, okay, so you're talking about player versus non-player. Like, say for example, my experience with Kingmaker is pretty limited. But as far as I understand it, the choices I make in dialogue or what my character chooses to do, the actions I perform, I'm in control of that. So my backstory is my own, my history is my own, my personality is my own. However, those NPCs or your party members you control, yes, you have control over their actions, but they all have their unique histories, their own personalities, their own thoughts, their ideas. They were scripted to be accordingly, like, these are these characters.
Yeah. I can agree.
So I'm thinking sort of like, from a player character perspective, there would be more improv, sort of like, you're not making up as you go, but somewhere in your head, you're developing this character and the choices that you make when say you role play or do something. Whereas, like, a non-player character typically would be scripted, so you have like a voice actor associated with it. They would have a backstory, sort of like an actor would be given, like, this is who this character is, this is what they're like, this is how they think about things. So almost like sort of like writing a book. It's like you're getting a background of them. And as far as the dead person goes, I think they're definitely characters because I've watched a lot of murder mysteries, and sometimes you don't even have to hear a voice or see anything written. Sometimes just either through flashbacks, that could be an example, or just hearing about the victim. So you're a detective, for example, and then you're questioning all these people that knew so-and-so who died. You're getting backstory. That person has a name. They have a history. They had a personality. You're getting to hear about the events that took place. So very much they are a main character in that story, even though they're dead.
Yep, and they didn't play a part in the current ongoing.
But favorite show being, or one of my favorite shows being Twin Peaks. Laura Palmer. She's dead technically through the whole thing. Yes, there's some flashbacks, but she's a main character of that whole series, but she's dead.
Yeah.
and most murder shows surrounding about, like, oh, it's a certain body or whatever. I think The Missing was another show that had something that was on AMC for a while.
There's like what, a billion shows about on ABC, CBS, all that. Yeah.
And I definitely think they are a character, just because they have a history, they have a background. They're, somebody wrote who this person was, what they liked, what they did. sometimes even their dreams and aspirations. They've already figured that out. And they're just playing that part. So I think if you're not actively playing a part, then maybe I guess you could say you'd be a player character. Whereas if you're just reciting, like, playing Forgotten Realms, and someone has to be a minster or something, and I mean, he is his own character, I mean, you're just going to be kind of emulating that.
Yeah.
So that, to me, even though someone's playing it, it's still almost an NPC, just because unless you're doing something crazy with him, I mean, he's got his own outlook on things, the things that he'll do. So it's almost like you're just acting a role out.
So I'll pose a scenario to you, because I agree. Getting back to my companion example, so there are times, especially in tabletop, where a player can be given a companion, but the DM has written the backstory for that companion, and when you get into combat, the DM is doing the combat rolls for that creature. And it's debatable, it depends on the DM. Some DMs will let the player choose what that companion is attacking. Other times, they may just do something that makes sense that a companion would do. I've seen both play out. In the case where the DM seems to be doing most of the decisions and choices for the companion, even though it's a companion on behalf of another player, would that be a player character or a non-player character?
Well, who's acting out the characters? You're just performing the roles and picking the targets, or
no. So you're the DM, but you have a player in your group that companion is.
So they're basically just making you choose how you want them to attack, but fundamentally they've already know who this character is.
Yeah.
They have the story.
Right.
They're giving you the words. I would say it's still an NPC. I mean, you're controlling their actions, but you're not controlling the character. And I think that's the difference. You can look at it as an entity, and yes, you control all the pawns on the table, but if you're thinking of it in terms of a character, they're alive in some sense. Even if they're like robotic, I mean, they're still alive. It's still something that's an entity that's well, sometimes maybe even not free thinking, but they're their own entity. So I don't know, but I like I said, I can see the argument there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a weird scenario with that in one of the campaigns I'm playing, where I play the idea of a Golemancer, basically someone who can make constructs and things like that. And he has a cohort in D&D terms, like a very almost equivalent companion, but just slightly
below.
Yeah, a few in technical terms, a few levels below my character, but so very but they're both very much separate entities. But it's hard for me to consider that cohort as a player character. I mean, if you get into a technical definition, it is, but I don't know. It's really hard. I think for me, companion almost is its own category. I think it's a little weird.
Or I think you could look at it like an RTS game where you're the commander, the god, and you're moving around all these little pawns, but you're not those little individual people that are there that you're moving to have attack at the base. They probably have their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own personalities.
Yep.
Don't be prejudiced against grunts. We're going to call it NAP, not all pawns.
Well, some of them you get the Sean Connery British accent with king and country, all that stuff.
That's true.
Yeah, it's just they have their own unique flavor to them, but you don't really know much about them. But you're not really playing the character.
Yeah, I think
controlling.
you're a player character controlling. So that you could translate that to tabletop terms. If you, and I don't think there's many campaigns like that, but as a player character, you are the ruler or a great leader of the town or city, and you determine the course of events for the NPCs in the town. How they go about it and how they do it is their own choice as far as how the DM rules it. But yeah, you would just be a player character controlling NPCs. That'd be a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and I think you are right that companions are a little bit of a different. Although in your specific case, the formerly little golem, now big golem, is a bit different because you fully created that character. Whereas most of the time with cohorts, they are like another living, breathing individual in the campaign that is then brought under your character instead of being made by your character. So there's a specific difference with yours. So, but I would think companions would definitely be a form of NPC in this case.
In some cases, yeah.
In a lot of cases, especially in video games like Fallout, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, which we've had comparisons to throughout this talk, those companions definitely are more NPC than what you're describing.
Yeah.
In that case, Boone definitely is his own character, New Vegas. What's that one character in Dragon Age 2 that you love so much, Survient? The little guy.
Oh, the dog?
No, not the dog. The dwarf, I think. Oh, or is that
Oh yeah.
Or is that Party Boy's favorite character?
I don't know. It's everybody's favorite character. Yeah, sure. He's weird because he's he doesn't. I don't think he shows up in both games.
He's in 2 and Inquisition. I know.
Oh yeah, he does come back.
He's like the storyteller.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since they've played, and I actually haven't played that much. I mostly get my Dragon Age origin or Dragon Age information from Survient and Party Boy.
Ogren. Yeah.
Yeah. And also Liara and Mass Effect, and there's tons of others.
Eric,
Karth from Knights Old Republic. Yeah, there's so many of them, and they're all NPCs. So they have stories that you can affect.
And your actions also depend upon, for example, Fallout. If they don't like what you're doing, they'll leave you high and dry.
Oh yeah.
But they have their own wants, but they have their own stories. They have their own personalities. They have their likes and dislikes. Mm-hmm. And your karma, or your faction, your reputation, depending on the actions that you perform or have them perform, can have an effect on that. But it doesn't really change the individual, because you're not necessarily. So if you're an evil character, or you're playing an evil role, and you have a goody two shoes with you. Mm-hmm. You can take them with you. Most games you can't convert those NPCs to become evil. They're not going to take that journey with you. Some of them will just stop and say, "I'm done," and walk away, because that's who the character is and that's how they were written. But there's no way to really, bring them over to you or change their opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you can. There's games where RPGs, especially, where you can influence the outcome of your character. A lot of them will have a dark path or a light path to the your party members of your group, where if you do certain events, they turn out one way. If you do other events, either they die or they have a different course of action.
Knights of the Old Republic,
too, especially.
Yeah, with Dark Revan. I mean, that can go many different ways, but. It's also written too as to not everybody's going to leave you behind.
Yeah.
It still allows you to play it through, but they can change some mechanics, but they can't, because it can only go two ways. So it's you either you can become the Jedi hero at the end of it, mm-hmm. or you could go back to being Dark Revan. And it's just, it can only end either way. But some of those characters aren't necessarily, they're not changing in a particular way. Mm-hmm. The aftermath may be different depending upon, in canon, how the story ends. But for the most part, they're not ever evolving with you and your choices.
Also, that's one thing I like about Fallout New Vegas, especially, is you have a lot of characters that you can change with that, and they'll have or even if you don't do anything with them, they can change. But they still really stick to their principles. Like, if you go full on in the Legion, Boone will leave and try and kill you. Arcade Gammon will run away, or you could sell him into slavery to Caesar.
Yeah. Arcade was a very good character, but he was very adamant on, you do anything with the Legion, he's out.
Mm-hmm. Survient, I know you've been playing a lot of Kingmaker recently, and you're a really big fan of, I forget the cleric's name, the dwarf cleric of the God of Chaos or whatever?
The god, I believe, is Gorum, and Grotus, and
Grotus, yeah.
I believe the dwarf is Gorum. He's weird as a concept for me, because basically, Harem. Sorry, everyone who's big into the game is just going bananas listening to this right now. But Harem is the dwarf that you get in your party. And I believe his god is Grotus, which is this deity of the end times. He basically, when the Pathfinder equivalent of the Rapture happens, this is not quite the Antichrist, but the thing that comes out of the woodwork to herald the end of times. But anyway, he's just different because, and I'm sure, people who are listening have played, some of them have played more games with stories than sense and can relate a similar character. But for me, the amount of stories I've read, movies I've watched, books I've read, games I've played, he was a fairly unique concept because he's sitting there as especially if in a high fantasy context of how dwarves normally are, and he's sitting there as everything a dwarf is, what he believes of everything a dwarf is not, and now is sitting there having to make the most of what he is. His whole backstory, without spoiling things, is he cannot craft things. Many things he touched just destroy. He crushes in his hands, and as you play throughout the game, it gets deeper into that and more elaborate, and there's new discoveries, and you as a player character are like, hey, you can go in a direction. You can either say like, hey, why do you feel this way about dwarves? Is maybe you're misinterpreting things. You can also just support him in the way he feels and say, you are opening my mind to totally new concepts, and you're totally right, and we should totally follow the way you think about things. Or you can just say, why aren't you dead yet, as you try to attack him. But there's different NPCs. One I'd like to bring up, and I'd like to throw that baton right back at you, Argati, speaking of KOTOR, one of our most beloved NPCs, HK-47.
HK-47, so good he's even made the jump into canon, apparently, with the one of the new books, or I think the new TV show coming out. I'll have to look more into that. HK-47 is, like you said, one of my favorite. You can remake him. It turns out you made him originally in KOTOR 1, and you unlock more of him in KOTOR 2, and it's great. I've not actually played these stuff in the Old Republic or Galaxies that had him in it, kind of unfortunately, but I have heard that he does play a small part in both of those games. Especially Galaxies, I think he's got a whole raid for him and a whole class unlock system, if I remember right.
Yeah, and then the Old Republic had a few things. I can't remember if I actually got to that point in the game, but I do remember reading up the references that they had to that. It was interesting.
Yeah, I think he's also got a couple, I think they were called flashpoints, and then also basically a raid equivalent in there. He was a great droid character. I personally kind of liked Goto from KOTOR 2 a little better. That's just because he was a lot different of a character. How about you, Chrisylum?
No.
You have any good NPCs you want to bring up?
Oh, there's plenty. I think one game that always comes back to me, and it sort of a blip on the radar, but Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, all about the NPCs. Every character just, I mean, from the whole, like the old school White Wolf, you know, Vampire the Masquerade, not the World of Darkness stuff. They really fit like the clans that they belong to, the personalities, the voice actors, the music. It just scenarios they were in. Hell, even I would even say Vampire, you know, the original, not Bloodlines, but the Masquerade, the first game that had come out. That had some really good characters too. But I would say lots. You know, it's almost like a movie, you could say, where, you know, supporting characters can make a huge difference.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes they help carry that story forward. I mean, there's some characters you'll gravitate to because you always want them in your party, and there's some that you're like, oh, I don't like you, so I'm just gonna, you can just sit in the corner and, you know, wait here. But I would say there's probably more than I can count. But you know, they add a lot of flavor to the world, and you know, like, they can either guide you or they can be a great companion or an adversary. But they help tell that story, and they help immerse you into that world.
I haven't actually played the Bloodlines game. I've played a few sessions of the new World of Darkness vampire game. I always kind of wanted to get into it. Way back in the day when I was 16 or so, my stepbrother had the book, so I'd always be flipping through those, looking at them, like, oh man, this game would be so great. And then I went to college. They were running I think they called it San Marcos After Dark, whole session up there for Texas State. So,
and that was the difference, I think, a lot with it. I mean, when most people think of a role-playing game in like a pen and paper sense, you know, you think of like rolling as in rolling the dice. And, you know, there's, you know, math and stats and things involved, but the one thing I think White Wolf always had, for better or worse, was, for me, it felt like it was more of a storytelling game. It was more about you acting out as a character, without going as far as to say LARPing. I think it's the closest. I mean, some people like to bring props and do everything, but I think a lot of the people that really got into it really wanted to like show their alter ego, show their character, but it felt like it was more of a, like, we're all telling the story.
Yeah.
So as much as the DM or the game master's trying to control it, everybody who's playing it is almost directing where that ship is going to go. And in most cases, a lot of the game masters for that had to pretty much pivot. I mean, they could have an idea of what they wanted to do, but like the context of the adventure, like the statistics of whatever you're fighting, even the whole story could just change just based upon, you know, the vibe in the room. And I always thought it was a very more, or I guess like a much more, you know, kind of game with some like flow to it, where you kind of had to be a little more loose.
Yeah.
Whereas with D&D, you know, traditionally you have like a module you're following, or you have an objective, and, you know, the premise of it usually isn't to like, hey, we're all going to go to the Dark Tower. You know, we're all in this village, we're staying here, we're hearing all these stories about this cult that exists here. I mean, at no point in time is the party like, oh yeah, we're just not going to go there. Let's go down the road south.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be up to the DM to be like, no, you can't go south, you have to go this way. Or, you know, you try going south, and you're actually going north.
Yep. Yeah, I think actually that is a critical thing, is at least in New World of Darkness, I think in Old World of Darkness, the Game Master, the Dungeon Master and all, actually was called the Storyteller, so
yep.
That is a good point. And I think my friend Cool Imp, who's going to be also part of this video later on, will be very happy to know that we talked a lot about World of Darkness, because that's one of his favorite things. He's always telling me stories about his mage characters or his vampire characters doing that. But it's funny you bring that up about D&D, because me and Survient actually what was that, 2-3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, we had a D&D session that literally was just, alright, so what you were planning on doing? Now we're going to do this instead. And it turned out to be a whole session of just role play without any actual combat at all.
Yeah, there's totally, and that's what I like where the tabletop community is going in a lot of the different franchises and games is a step away from the hard numbers. Not that those are not important. For me, for a lot of those, not the D20 itself, but the dice are a critical part of what make up those games. And that's not to say you can't have dice-less versions. They are known by that denomination of that they have no dice. It's a notable thing for them. But I like the steps that they're taking to encourage role play and create rewards and tools for game masters or that particular game's equivalent of a game master to give out rewards and encourage the role play side. I think that's something that gets lost a lot in some of the, I wouldn't even call them older settings. I think it started heavily with that and then moved towards more the hard numbers, and now we're coming back to, I wouldn't quite call it a renaissance yet. I think we still got a little ways to go, but some good stuff coming out of it. But since we're on the topic of NPCs, let's address the elephant in the room. Is Claptrap an NPC?
He is in 1, 2, and Tales from the Borderlands. However, the pre-sequel, he is a player character, so by definition, he is a PC.
Yeah, but there are multiple Claptrap units.
No, there's not. There isn't one, but they all get wiped out. And so, Claptrap in 2, who is also the Claptrap from the pre-sequel, is the only Claptrap after that point.
At least that's what you want you to believe.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that there's a whole factory set up and then he's going to take over the multiverse with it.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, so we talked about companions and all that. How about some good antagonists? For someone, what is one of your favorite antagonists from video games?
Video games in general?
Or just any kind of game. Just whatever one of your favorites is.
Oh, that could take me a while. That there.
So many.
I'm trying to think of the most notable ones. Like the ones that you really like. Who was your the most nefarious of the nemesis? The one that you defeat or outsmart at the end of the game, and you just feel the most like, oh, I got that son of a gun.
Yeah.
I think a lot of recent games tend to do that a little bit more. Coming from memory, I would say the most recent God of War. But there was a lot leading up to that where you were very invested into the characters. So it almost kind of made it feel a little personal. But the one thing I've liked that seems to be different is when there's no main villain, but depending upon how you look at the story, like for example, The Last of Us, which most people have probably heard about or played.
Yep.
There's adversaries, and there's obviously the spore people, or they're against you. The world is against you. But at the end, I mean, is Joel the villain? I mean, some people could agree with what he did,
yep.
And then other people could say no, he's the villain. But it's your decision as that character of how you saw things out and through. But that's pretty much the canon of what happens with that character. Is he's not going to let Ellie die.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're the hero, but if you're looking at it from a non. Like you're not playing the game, you're kind of the villain in a way too.
Yeah. And that's why it's villain or antagonist.
And I think it gives it a more interesting, because sometimes it's hard to write a good a villain, because the villain technically sometimes has to be stronger than the other characters.
Sometimes, yeah.
Final Fantasy traditional. I guess you would say the Final Fantasy VI or R3 with Kefka.
Yep.
I mean, flamboyant, just a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
Had a personality, but not enough to really get me going. Even Sephiroth, you saw him, and you're like, oh, he's cool looking. Cool music at the end, the final battle. Not necessarily, like, I'll always remember it for what it is, but the character just never really was there.
Yeah, I don't think Final Fantasy really had a good, like, persistent villain until maybe Kuja in 9 or Seymour in 10. One of those two, depending on how you think about it.
The same thing you get into, like, some of the Resident Evil games. You know, it's just, you know, like Wesker. He's a common theme that, you know, people always seem to have liked, for good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it depends. I guess it's kind of hard to say when it comes to villains. I mean, everybody likes a good villain. I guess the biggest one probably for everybody, if you think of whether it be movies, whether it be television, I mean, when you think of the best villain in the world, most people will always go to the Joker.
Yep.
So when you're playing, you know, Arkham City, you know, or, you know, Arkham Knight, or whatever, it's the Joker is almost the perfect villain.
Yeah.
And it's that relationship that you have going on. It's just like you want to get to him, but you want to keep hearing him. You want him to keep antagonizing you. You want him to keep doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess in some ways I may say that. Just I know it's kind of an easy answer, kind of a cheap and generic, like not a deep cut, but yeah, fun. Or I think maybe another one too for me would definitely be maybe the Soul Reaver games, and then leading into Defiance, where it was the elder god, Tony J, the guy who had a really raspy, deep voice, used to play him. And, you know, Kane is still, I mean, he's not a hero by any means, but he you know, there was something worse than him.
Yeah.
But I always thought that had a very interesting aspect of it, because Soul Reaver, you know, was Raziel, you were dead set against Kane. From the perspective and everything you knew Kane as, you saw him as the villain. And then they just completely turned around on its head, and it's just the whole thing of, like, free choice and destiny and how things are supposed to flow, and then to find out that, you know, everything has pretty much already been told, and it's not quite what you think happened, and it kind of turns it all over on its head. And I was disappointed when it ended, because I don't think we'll ever see another Legacy of Kain or finale, but it kind of goes back to the beginning where Kain is there when Kain first approaches the pillars and starts everything. So what is he going to do now? Like, will he stop himself from ever doing it? Will he let it all happen? Will he, you know, how will he change that all from taking place? And I thought that was kind of fascinating, because it's almost like a whole cast is full of villains to some degree. Nobody in there was technically a great person. I mean, they were all either transformed from angels to you know, the vampires or whatever, but it's just there's not a whole lot. Everybody has some sort of agenda.
Yeah.
Even the woman who was missing half her face, I forget her name, who was warning you about the pillars, she had an agenda too. So it's like they're all almost trying to one-up each other.
Yeah. How about you, Survient?
Well, the one that comes to my mind, and again, I'd have to really, the same as Chrisylum, I'd have to go and, well, like, list out the games I've played, do some back steps, and try and figure out, you know, who my most iconic would be. But the one that comes to mind as an example is from the Dragon Age series, Corypheus, but not from an Inquisition, specifically DLC that came out, I believe, for Dragon Age 2, where you first get introduced to him at the end of that DLC chain. It was very interesting because with the backstory in Dragon Age, you're in this weird high fantasy post-apocalyptic setting, but not like how, what is it, in D&D, Dark Sun, or there's one
Dark Sun, yeah.
So with Dragon Age, it's not quite the same idea, but there's definitely, it's almost this Lord of the Rings-esque end downtime or recession where there were once even greater things, and now you're living in just what we would just consider a normal high fantasy setting with dwarves, elves, etc. But they, in this lore, consider it a dark period because magic has fallen down from grace and is generally frowned upon, but not quite as bad as Dark Sun. But the Magi in the backstory of Dragon Age are looked at as these selfish beings of not quite evil, but self-serving and not really focused of their own ends and their own means. Selfish definitely would be close to the way you describe it. But the interesting thing is, the whole your role in the game is to fight the Dragon Age equivalent of orcs and things like that. And I'm talking Tolkien orcs. I'm not talking like D&D style orcs, where they're these spawn of evil that come up from nothing, and the just pure evil essence itself. In relating to other people who played Dragon Age, the Darkspawn is what I'm referring to. And that they came about after the fall of the mages. But anyway, getting back on point, the DLC, you go and explore an outpost of this Magi empire that had fallen many centuries ago. And at the end, you bump into this entity of Corypheus, and you wake him from his slumber. And it's really interesting because in the lore from the first game and the second game, you get really built into this idea of there's this single divine entity. It's not a polytheistic setting like most high fantasy settings are. They have one divine being known as the Maker, and their whole setting is that he's turned their back on his adherents. So you're sitting there as any of the clerics or equivalent types in that setting, they're following a god that's turned their back on him, that has turned his back on them, and it makes an interesting dynamic. It's all about certain viewpoints of, say, Christianity, that kind of thing, where you're repenting for sin, and that's the way they chose to play out the backstory on the religious side of Dragon Age. And so the story goes that these ancient Magi tried to use magic to breach into the realm of this great Maker, and that's why he's turned his back on them, and why there was this cataclysm that made the fall of this empire of the Magi, and then thus these Darkspawn came up. The interesting thing with Corypheus is he was one of these high magisters of this ancient Magi culture, and until you bump into him, you had no hard evidence as a player character that any of that was true. There's a lot of points in the game where you get dialogue and story that allows you to question this Maker's existence and this backstory, that maybe the Darkspawn come from something else. A lot of the NPCs are skeptical about the true origins of Darkspawn. But then you sit here, you get to this top of this tower, you bump into the final boss of this area after fighting your way up through all these monsters and traps and puzzles, and at the top of it you bump into Corypheus, and he wakes up from an ancient slumber for 1,000 years or whatever. And just the way that they built the dialogue for him, the way the voice actor's pacing was, the model animation of the character, it was so interesting. The Magisters themselves had their own deities, and you see recordings of this in lore. A lot of the books and stuff are banned in the game setting, so you got to dig deep to try and find it. But you'll see references to the deities of these Magisters, and there's a lot of like hints and rumors that some of the boss monsters you fight throughout the Dragon Age series were once actual deities of the Magisters fallen from grace. But so anyway, you bump into Corypheus, he wakes up, and the first thing he mutters is, basically, who are you, what are you doing here? But then he kind of looks around, doesn't quite get a realization of what's happened, and he just looks up, looking for his gods, and he says, Dumat, where are you? Have you forsaken me? In such this, it's just this weird. You get all this build up in the Dragon Age series of how things are, what the world is like, how it's set, and then you bump into this antagonist who wields all this great power, and just the way they portray the character, his perception of lesser beings, higher beings, and that he would have this familiarity with his deity at that level, expecting him just to physically be present in front of him. It was just very chilling. It was you definitely got goosebumps if you played through the first and second game, got through the DLC, got to that point, listening to all the lore. Now, that unfortunately went downhill with Inquisition. I enjoyed the game overall in Inquisition, but I'm not a fan with what they did with Corypheus as a character. He had so much potential in that DLC. Coming out of the DLC, they introduced this entity, and now he's awakened, and now he's going to, kind of like how Sauron rising in Tolkien, but just the way they built the story, they told the tale, they had all that build-up, that potential, you leaving that DLC, having beaten it, trying to think for the future, what's going to happen. The feeling you were left with was definitely something to remember. It definitely left set a tone with me that I carried forward until the next Dragon Age game, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. That was one of the better storylines I had seen in a while. Granted, if you combine the whole story chain, it's debatable how good it is, but up to that point, it was very solid. And as an antagonist at that point who only had a handful of dialogue, that he stuck with you that much was very impressive.
All right. Yeah. Mine, interestingly enough, is a combination of a couple that have been here in one character. So he's kind of like Kefka in how he operated, how he was kind of like a lower person in the Empire that took over. He also was a Final Fantasy villain. But also, kind of a little bit of a spoiler warning for Final Fantasy 15, he was kind of the origin of a lot of the world's problems, like Survient's one. I really like Arden from Final Fantasy 15. He was just a great character. Very tragic backstory. Arguably got what he wanted at the end, but he was just such a great antagonist through the whole game. I really enjoyed everything they did with him, how he would completely mess with your characters, end up scarring them, all this stuff, and it was just a beautiful game, a beautiful journey, getting up there to finally take your revenge on him and get rid of him, purge the world of his presence. But just everything about 15 because of him was so great. I really enjoyed everything his character did. I don't want to get into too much more because there are heavy spoilers for that. It's a fairly recent game, and also we are getting a little bit more from him coming up soon, apparently, with a new DLC. So I'm really looking forward to that. But
I guess in some ways it would sort of be like the relationship between Batman and the Joker, where he's taking you for a ride.
yes,
He's going to get under your skin, and you want more of it. Like you need to have that. It's like it's what's compelling you to move forward. Those are always the best kinds of villains, not just the evil warlord who lives in a castle that you only know by name and all of his evil doings, but there's no relationship there. There's no taunting. There's no teasing.
Yeah.
There's no you know, you're not get to see the wake of all the damage that they do and say, I gotta go get that guy.
Oh yeah, the personal villains are always the best. Another favorite of mine is from Breath of Fire 3. Not even like the main antagonist of the whole thing, but there's a couple of horsemen, I forget their names exactly. I think it's like Balin and Stalin or something like that. But just the first act of the game, they destroy your house. They kill your two best friends. They imprison you in a castle. They rig fights against you. And then you finally get to murder them on a bridge. And it's just so good. I mean, it also helps that they turn into a freaking horse Ultraman, but those two are part of the reasons why Breath of Fire 3 is probably my favorite of the PlayStation era games. There's so much fun from that.
And I guess another thing I was kind of thinking of is a lot of the more recent games, the villains don't necessarily seem front and center. One of my favorite series, the past probably 10 years, is Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are central characters to the story, but they almost take a back seat to the actual, like, the game, the lore, the world. It's like the more of the game involves the world and the atmosphere.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily about a strong villain. Yes, there's a stronger power that you have to, just like an end boss that you have to destroy. And yeah, they have some lore and history behind them, but there's a bunch of them, and they're not really, some don't really sell it more than the others. Like, no one's really, you know, trying to get you.
Yeah.
And I think that's almost a rarity in some games, and I think it comes up to the writers nowadays, where you can have a perfectly playable game that's super enjoyable, but you know the last boss may not necessarily be the cherry on top of the sundae.
Yeah, and that is something I'm liking. Is yeah, like I said, a lot of games are making the world kind of a really big antagonist for you. Like I said, yeah, the Souls type games. I haven't played Bloodborne or Demon Souls, but Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 I have played at least some of. More Dark Souls 1 than 2 and 3, but I've still got a decent amount in there. And yeah, just a very hostile world is also really great. And that's, again, another thing I kind of like about 15 and some other games. Dragon Age is also kind of the same way. If I remember right, I haven't played Dragon Age too much.
Well, I mean, Dragon Age, you have the... It's weird, too, because you get the they're not really slums. They're just like the dwarves are down to one great city, and they originally had, I think, 7 or 9, and elves are in a similar state. But you know, you're in the human cities, and aside from like the elven and dwarven slums and stuff like that, which you would see in most high fantasy settings, it feels pretty standard high fantasy. It's hard. You really, as a character, you have to look between the cracks to see the scarred earth, that kind of thing. Now, as you get deeper into the dwarven territory throughout the campaign, you start seeing it. You know, there's darkspawn everywhere. They're coming from the earth, and you see how the dwarves are constantly having to fight off their forces. Much like how in other settings you have the same idea. You know, Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings had similar references. I know in D&D they have some references to that with some of the cast of the dwarves, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, so talking about villains in general, one interesting one for me that, you know, there's a thing of repetition, but every great story, you know, that saying, every great story's already been told. I don't know how much truth there is to that statement, but
Joseph Campbell.
The one backstory I'm a sucker for with a lot of villains is where they can't. I mean, it's pretty much what I would dub, like, at this point, this year localized in the confines of this kitchen. I would say call it Thanos syndrome, where you go in as a villain with the best of intentions. you were at the time what you considered the protagonist, and then you reap the rewards of your efforts only to find out that you, in fact, were the villain the whole time. I'm a sucker for that. I love seeing that in backstories. You sit there, and I think I've played one or two games. It's all jumbled. That's the thing. You play enough games, and until you go back and replay them, sometimes they become a jumbled mess in your mind. But I do remember ones where you are a protagonist following another protagonist's steps, and then you have all these evidences of the deeds of the antagonist, and then you get to the end only to find out that the protagonist you were following became the antagonist in the end. And I'm just like, I'm a sucker for those and stories and twists and plot lines. But speaking of favored villains, I'm going to put Argati on the spot here and see if he can get a little bit of diatribe out of one of our favorite villains to enjoy and hate, Vor from Warframe.
Yes, Vor. I love Uncle Vor. He is so great. I probably at this point will put up a picture of my shrine to him on my orbiter in Warframe. But yeah, he's great. Vor's Prize. Very first thing you do in Warframe now, where you got to escape from his clutches. He's basically captured you like a bunch of other Warframes. Lotus breaks you out, and you go through. You slowly regain your abilities, your various parts of your ship, and you fight him and cut him in half. And it seems like, oh, great, everything's over. And then you get into the void, as they call it in Warframe, and he comes back, and he tells you, brothers, did I not tell you of this day? And it's just a great monologue. Vor's great. I do like a couple other ones too. I play a little bit of the new Fortuna that they've released in Warframe now for the second open world area, and Nefanyo's got a lot of fun stuff about putting all these people into debt and taking away their limbs and stuff. And definitely we need to check that out a lot more, I think, once we all stop being burnt out on Warframe.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, Warframe is interesting. The two, I wouldn't call them necessarily antagonists, but antagonizing forces that I take to heart. Vor is definitely one. He has that personality. He sticks with you. All of the other villains seem fairly forgettable. The other is just the hive mind of the infested. It sticks with you. It's never really coming from one central source. It is all encompassing, and when as a player, the game puts you in a situation to remind you of that the infested are a thing, and you have to contend with them. And will the game world ever be free of the infested menace? It's an interesting thought process to go through. Versus all the other villains, you talk about the Corpus, you talk about the Grenier forces, and then the other factions you bump into as you play through the game. You can remember some of their dialogue, you see their face, you recognize who they are, but they're not the first ones that come to mind. For me, it's definitely Vor and the Infested. It just creates an interesting dynamic, I think.
Yeah. I can see that. However, I know for a fact that you have not completed the Chains of Horror or Beyond, so you do not know the horror that is the Man in the Wall, and also you have not read or met up with Papa Ballas yet, who is a fucking asshole. So you need to go and do Chains of Horror and the Sacrifice, and I think there's another couple quests that actually I need to do now tied into that. But yeah, they definitely get some more villains in Warframe beyond what you're doing. Also, you completely forgot about Salad 5.
Yeah, Salad 5 gets interesting, but again, I consider him a little more forgettable than Vor.
I can see that.
Yeah. You remember him, but Yeah, Vor, there's something about his personality. Like, he seems to definitely have his own agenda. His own thing. All the other villains seem to just be thralls of a greater force of one kind or another. They might have their own self-interests, but they usually have some kind of loyalty to one faction or another.
I believe Vor actually might be under the influence of a greater higher being.
Yeah, and then that's fun. The fun parts to debate.
Who he is.
Yeah.
So yeah, and also Warframe's another one that does have a kind of the world's trying to kill you too, and the kind of the void is turning out more and more to not be just this place where you find all this loot. It is turning out to actually be a kind of creepy ass place that could possibly cause a lot of damage.
Yeah, I do like the whole concept of the void because in tabletop, the Starfinder setting has a very similar thing. I believe they call it the gap, where it's what for people who are not familiar with Starfinder, you can think of it as, if you've played Minecraft, the Nether version in terms of distance. As far as the atmosphere, it's all very, I guess, superimposed would be the way to think of it, much like how Warframe's Void looks. But the whole point of it in a campaign setting is a way to travel faster. You know, the distance you travel in that area, in that space, is much shorter distance than you would actually be traveling in the material plane. But that has the same premise where there's weird, creepy, far realm type entities existing, and those are always fun to deal with. And some of the villains to come out of there can be interesting as well.
Yep. And also kind of in D&D terms, it's like a mixture of the astral plane and the far realms.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really great like that.
Well, let's talk about some classics. So, of the classic antagonists, I'm trying to keep it on with NPCs. Argati, which one sticks with you? I mean, classic antagonist.
Classic antagonist. I'm gonna have to go with Ganondorf from like Ocarina of Time.
Yeah,
definitely. He's kind of a good foil. Also Skull Kid from Majora's Mask, but more Ganondorf I think kind of sticks out more for me as a good classic antagonist.
What about you, Chrisylum?
I don't know about... I've been trying to think back about some other villains that I definitely recall that had a major impact on me, and the one that I can't believe I totally forgot to mention was Far Cry 3, Voss Montenegro.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, just in your face, crazy, just very much about that antagonist. He played a very, very pivotal part in that game. And I completely had almost glanced over it.
Yeah.
And then another example I was thinking of too was BioShock Infinite, or even BioShock in general. With the first one,
oh my god,
in the first one you're speaking to Atlas the whole time, and he's kind of leading the way. He's narrating you, he's leading you, but
yep.
He is the antagonist, and you know him from the very beginning, pretty much.
And then the twist happens.
Yes.
Would you kindly?
Would you kindly? And that was just very clever. And then with BioShock Infinite, you are Comstock. Booker DeWitt is Comstock, but in a different time. Mm-hmm. So you are the antagonist. This is you, and this is where your life kind of headed. So it's an interesting duality to it.
Definitely that stuck with me in BioShock. That was a very interesting result of that. I'd forgotten about it, but yeah, as you said, it came right back. I was like, oh yeah, I remember the impact that would have left. Honestly, for me, and we're talking, classic villains. One that sticks with me is the original Donkey Kong itself had no dialogue. It was an arcade game but as they went on with the series, I mean, because that's the thing is like, you know, that one's interesting because some players out there consider that the beginning and end, aside from maybe Donkey Kong Jr. They don't really necessarily consider Donkey Kong Country part of the whole series. They consider that separate. From my side, I actually consider it all one sequential chain. And for me, it's been interesting because you, as a player, sit there. And this is so weird talking about this for a game that's just a platformer. There is story there, but the dialogue is generally minimal. In Donkey Kong Country, you go through and much to comedic effect, but you bump into Cranky Kong a lot, and the whole story is going that he was the original Donkey Kong villain from the original game. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was a very bizarre. As a kid when I played it, it didn't click. But then later on, having to go back and revisit things and look at lore again. New games come out that reference old ones. Going back and that realization, and then you just see like how you have. And there's other games that have done it where, in the for lack of a better term, the next game you get the original antagonist in a neutered form. Like, I've seen that happen in a few games, and I think it's always an interesting dynamic. It's not that necessarily the villain doesn't care anymore. They just, in some cases it does, but others, they just are either passing the torch to the protagonist to carry their agenda, or they realize there's a greater effort to be had, that kind of thing. And I always think those are interesting dynamics.
Mm-hmm. On your first point, I just recently got through the Metro Kingdom on Mario Odyssey. I just kind of put it on hold for a long time, and it straight up confirms that, yeah, it is the same Donkey Kong, because it's got all the references to it, and it even has Mario retake his role as Jumpman for a part of it while you go through the festival on there. And on your second point, there's even been a few where mid-story that happens, like really classic example, Chrono Trigger with Magnus.
I was going to mention Magus, but that frustrates. For Chrono Trigger, Magus, and that whole thing frustrates me. I really, as a character, as a player of the game, I wanted nothing more than a way to figure out how to save some of those characters from Zeal, preserve that kingdom in one way or another. But the way they did the story, the dialogue, and everything, I wouldn't call it necessarily perfect, but it was as close as you're going to get. And I would not have it any other way. I mean, it was just one of those. I think great storytelling is to create that internal conflict for a player. They're sitting there and they're having to make hard choices. That's a great. For me, that's a sign of a great story. Having a story where every choice leads to ruin, no matter what you do, all of your efforts are futile. There are a few edge cases where that's acceptable, but I think in most cases it's not a fun way to go. But sometimes you just have that tragedy, and I think the way that the writers did that part in Chrono Trigger and the overall story, it was incredible. What was that other one? I'm going to need a minute to think about that one. As far as the trying to save other characters. Oh, Witcher, the entire series. Like, that's the same idea as freaking. You get a lot of quests where it's not necessarily there's no happy ending, but like it's a somber ending, a somber happy ending. Like, you're just like, we survived today. That's our ending. We lived. That's all the only good to come out of this. So I don't think that should be necessarily every game that comes out, but I do enjoy that when a game is not afraid to give you a harsh taste of reality.
And a little bit of spoiler warning again, but that's why I love Final Fantasy 15, is because it does that so well. The ending literally breaks your heart, but it's so good that you still want to keep playing. At least most people do. And they were apparently planning on making a happy ending kind of deal, like they did with one of the DLCs, but they were going to expand it more. Unfortunately, they canceled all of that, so people who wanted it couldn't get it. But I really love that about Final Fantasy 15 is it just struck you so hard with that.
All right, so kind of mixing this up again, conundrums, because I brought up the companion thing. Another one is, so how do you classify when you get into a multiverse situation? I think a great example would be like a game storyline that has a similar dynamic to this story of like the Spider-Man multiverse, where you've got all these different creations of Spider-Man himself.
Peter Parker, Miles Morales, Spider-Gwen.
Yeah, so actually, I guess if I would put that into a relatable context, what about games where you play the main character, but you bump into NPC versions that are multiverse variants of the protagonist? Are all those NPCs? Are you now an NPC? Like, where does it end and where does it begin?
Well, that's different because you're playing almost a simulation. So, Spider-Man that recently came out plays Peter Parker, and Miles Morales is in there, and many other characters. Peter Parker's Peter Parker. He's got his own personality. He's got his own quips. You're not really... You're controlling, and it's almost like you're playing, like sitting on his shoulder. It's like, yes, you're doing all the work, but it's telling the story out of that. It's not that you're injecting any of your beliefs or opinions or decisions onto Peter. It's always going to play out the same way. Peter Parker's always going to be Peter Parker. He's always going to be awkward and funny and sarcastic, just the way you expect Peter Parker to be. But in that way, you're playing. But that's a different kind of a game, I would think, in less of an RPG terms or pen and paper, where you're almost playing like a simulation. You're just playing. You're Spider-Man. So the whole objective is just to enjoy the experience of being Spider-Man, but without having to make any of the decisions propel the story other than just the way it's going to go.
Okay. Now that actually brings a good point. So here's a question Sam can answer. I'm not sure, or Survient can answer. I'm not sure, Chrisylum, what your history is with this series, but would either Desmond Miles or Ezio Auditore, Altair, would either of them be villains or NPCs?
Who's the player? Who's the NPC?
Yeah.
Wow, that. I mean, for me, I turned it on the head. I consider Desmond the NPC, and then Ezio the player character. But it's weird that Assassin's Creed.
Assassin's Creed is
weird. For better or worse, for Assassin's Creed, I think a lot of them, up until, I don't remember which game got to that point in the story, up until that point where you had that trans-temporal communication between both characters at the same time.
Revelations.
Up to that point, I think a traditional model where Desmond is the player character, and then either Ezio or any of the other memories he's recollecting he's playing them out. Those would be NPCs. He's a player character playing out. You're a player character playing a player character playing out how an NPC would act.
Okay.
When that happened in that storyline, though, that really broke the mold. It made it very, very complicated. And at that point, I think anyone's argument can hold some water. in the case that I would argue that the characters within the simulations during those time settings are the player characters, and then Desmond himself would be an NPC. But that reminded me of what kind of where I was going on my train of thought. Anytime you're playing an adventure game, RPG, that kind of thing, where you're playing a character whose story's already been written, and you're just tracing their steps, Assassin's Creed is a great example of this, especially as you are trying to play a character that the history has already been written for them. You're retracing their steps. I likened it to verbal storytelling of culture. So if you go and you have a culture who has passed down their legends through tales for generations and generations and generations of oratory recollection, you'll get, if you ask, let's say a tribe at the time that spanned a continent, and you ask them this common story they all tell, you probably, ask 5 tribes, you get 5 different stories. Very similar elements, but things play out slightly different. And that's how I liken to think of whenever you are playing a character whose story's already been written. That's kind of what it is. It's just like a fuzziness in the details. You can have the same story, but the minor details alter slightly. Now, obviously, that's different when you get into games, especially RPGs, that have a morality element like Mass Effect or Dragon Age or that kind of thing, where you can totally change the course of the game, but some common elements still remain.
Alright, yeah, you can see that. So in that case, like a visual novel protagonist, or like a Telltale Games protagonist, those would be kind of more along that line.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic anytime you're playing a character who you have the canon story, the canon course of events that happened, and then you have variations of that. Like in canon, like for Mass Effect, you would save the council, and then outside of canon, you would let them die.
No, it's totally canon that the council died. That's always will be canon. There will never be any fight on this. Council always dies. It is not acceptable otherwise.
The game crashes. One of the many bugs of Mass Effect. Okay, and that's actually an interesting dynamic. So, I'm trying to think how to word it. What is your take on when, especially because this would be specific to video game? Oh, actually, and there's a way it can apply to tabletop. So in a video game sense, when a bug affects the dialogue of an NPC in a significant way, and it's a subtle that you can't really tell right away it's a bug. Like, so you'll go, and let's say, especially like some of the classic games from the 90s, you go and you'll play through it, and then you find out years later, as people do deep dives in these games, that due to a bug, the dialogue in the actual game was meant to be totally different. Is the original dialogue or actions as it happened in the game the true story of that character, or is the original intended as written version the actual true story? And then putting it in a tabletop context, that a DM forgot his notes and had to improvise versus what he had written down.
I think in the video, I'm not too sure on the DM one. I have been known to go back and be like, all right, so here's what I actually meant to do, but whatever, we'll do that.
Yep.
But in the other one, I'm not as sure on the older games, like unless they get a re-release that fixes that, I'm not sure. But it's funny we bring up the council all that, because Mass Effect 1 did have a bug with one of its quests, and they actually acknowledge it in the second game, where you try and do the right thing with this one guy who's a big fan of you, and I think even if you do the Paragon one, you still pull a gun on him, and so he freaks out about it in the second game, and goes off on this whole big thing about it, and I think they even bring that in the third game too. So in that case, they made it canon, but like I said, if they do a remaster, something like that, and they correct it, then that would be canon, but if they never do, then I think what's in the game itself would be the canon.
Well, I guess it would depend upon who's playing what version of what. I mean, I guess you could say the same for anime, which I hear all the time, that, if it's, dubbed or whatever else, sometimes you're not getting the full details of it, but, if you get a haphazard story, maybe you understand it one way, and you see it later, and you're seeing the original release, and then you're getting, oh, wait a minute, it's a little bit different. I mean, I guess in some ways it's still a complete story, whether or not you feel satisfied or maybe, hopefully, it doesn't confuse you towards the end of it. But I guess that's a technicality. I mean, I guess, obviously, there's the original way it was meant to be told, if there's a beginning and end to it, and it's the author's intention, whoever came up with it. And then whether or not it gets mistranslated, that's a whole other story, but, I mean, fundamentally, it's what was intended. Sometimes how it gets interpreted, could be different too, but it just depends, I think, on who's watching it when, and however that kind of shakes out. But
yeah, and translations, that is another thing that I'll say in that case, the original translation I think would probably be the canon in there. But yeah, like if there's an error in the original translation that then is copied in the original release that is translated out, probably I would consider that canon, unless again they fix it in
find
a
a way to
re-release or something,
or change it up.
Yeah, or maybe if there's like outside media that changes that.
Yeah.
Also, like a comic series.
But now it's a lot easier, I think, for that to happen too.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get more development feedback where if something wasn't intended, it's more public knowledge. Whereas, back in the day, there was no way. I mean, pre-internet, just you wouldn't. Maybe you get a rambling of it in a bibliography, or but other than that, you wouldn't find out about it. Whereas now, you'll probably get an article on it. Mm-hmm. It'll be available probably within a week of its release. But
or if you're lucky, you get a extended cut release of the ending, where instead of 3 different colors coming out at you, it actually gives you a somewhat proper ending.
No idea what you're referencing.
I am glad that we have that now instead of, say, a certain game where you go through playing it and they just completely cut out the last world and you have no idea why your teachers turned on you and it ends suddenly. And, man, I hate KOTOR 2 on release. I'm glad that there are mods that fix it now.
Oh yeah, no, I need to probably go back and replay that. But speaking of endings, that is one on Kingmaker, is how abrupt it was. It was definitely interesting. But getting back to NPCs, one that comes to mind, not a particular one, but like a scenario that comes to mind. What is your take? The prompt being, what is your take on forced NPCs? My example for recent that we all would have played. I forget the role. The one character you run into in Monster Hunter. That's your partner, not the cat, but the
basically your tutorial NPC. I know who you're talking about. I think she's the.
Like the handler?
Handler, yes.
Yeah, so the handler. So keeping that immediate thought and feeling in mind, other games where, so example for me, for Kingmaker, you get this character, Lindsay. You cannot get rid of this character. You can get rid of all other NPCs, but you cannot get rid of that one character, and they have some kind of MacGuffin that forces them to be in there. In the case of Kingmaker, Lindsay is the storyteller writing the book that you're reading as a player character.
I thought it was cleverly introduced, whereas the handler I just found annoying and wanted to get a new handler the whole time.
I can see that.
Thank you. Yeah, I felt exactly the same way as Chrisylum did about the handler. But kind of going back, can you recollect any other games where you had a forced NPC that you just were like, I want to get rid of this person, or I don't want to have to dialogue with this person anymore?
I can't think of anything offhand. Closest I would think, aside from, again, the handler.
Link! Hey, listen.
Navi's alright. Tunnel is a much better version of Navi. V is a much worse version.
I liked Midna.
Midna, yeah, Midna's pretty good. Zelda herself from Breath of the Wild is alright. She doesn't show up too often.
Does she sound like Miss Piggy to you?
A little bit, yes.
I got a very big Miss Piggy vibe through the whole thing, and it kind of ruined it for me.
Yeah. But the one I was thinking of was, I think it's Victor from Fallout New Vegas, who, even if you kill him, he will show up later on down the line and keep showing up. And then eventually you get Yes Man, who is my favorite ending in it. But yeah, you can't get rid of him either. And at least they give them a legit reason why they can't be, because they'll just transfer the program into another Securitron, and you can't wipe them all out.
Yeah, Victor was pretty clever. I forgot all about Victor. He was a good one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, Argati can probably relate to is Ortis. I remember in
Yes.
Warframe, you get this ship's AI assistant, and initially they gave you no option. This is so I appreciate the game developers on this because they make it explicit menu option. So this AI on your ship has its own volume slider. Mm-hmm. There's all these other NPCs that will dialogue with you, and he has his own volume slider. Yep. So you can hear all their other dialogue, but you can take him and mute him. But they didn't introduce that for a few patches. That was... Oh my god, I hated Ortis. I still hate Ortis.
Man, Ortis is the best. I don't know what you're talking about. Ortis is better than the Lotus. Fuck you, Space Mom. I prefer Space Dad Ortis much better.
No, Space Dad is, what's his face?
Well, there is Ballus, but no, fuck Ballus too.
No. The Conclave guy.
Tension?
Tension's...
No.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah.
Tension's like your other weird
uncle. Yeah, your other weird uncle, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But, Ortis, knowing what I know about him, I really love him. He is a great character, especially all that he's done for us lately. Yeah.
Cool.
You really need to play more Warframe.
That doesn't just go to me. Apparently that goes to everyone listening to this. The answer is always play more Warframe.
Even me, I know my most popular video is Warframe. I need to do a lot more. When I stop being burnt out on it, I will. But anyway.
So we're going to be talking NPCs, we're talking villains. What's your take on the recent incarnations of some of our favorite villains? A la Bowser and on.
I really like Odyssey's Bowser. It's been really fun. I haven't beaten it yet. I know I'm being really slow. I'm on the Luncheon Kingdom now. But I'm really enjoying going through that so far. I don't like Calamity Ganon. I mean, it's cool, especially if some of the theories I've seen are correct, and he's basically woven it all back together into one and taken all of his powers from it. But I don't know, he's been downgraded back to a force of evil, a force of nature, which I guess is what he was back in the original 2, 3, 4 games. But
he had no personality.
Yeah,
I mean, he was just the ominous presence, the big baddie at the end, and it was really. You didn't get any intention other than it's just Ganon, and that's what Ganon does.
Yeah, whereas Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess...
Especially Wind Waker. He was an active villain, and he played an active role, and I think it made all the difference.
Yeah.
I think the nostalgia of Ganon is what worked for Calamity, so as soon as you see, the shape of the hog's head, and the smoke and the clouds kind of swirling around Hyrule Castle, it gives you those goosebumps. But there is no character there.
Yeah.
other than your nostalgia for Ganon.
Yeah. I will say, though, probably my favorite version of Ganon is the one that everyone's going to say is not canon, but whatever. Hyrule Warriors Ganondorf.
Hyrule Warriors was a great game.
It was. I
In
loved it
general.
so much. I've gotten it twice now for Wii U and Switch.
My first foray into anything Dynasty Warriors, and having that Zelda skin really sold it for me.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know all those characters, so it worked.
And then you get a couple kind of new ones, like I'm really liking Linkle's whole side missions in it on the Switch. It's great. Others kind of, well, this wasn't as recent, but a lot of people really hated it. I liked what they did with Mass Effect Andromeda. Its villain, I liked a lot of Mass Effect Andromeda. I think that game got a lot of unfair hate, a lot more than it deserved. Was not a perfect game. Might not even been a great game, but it was a good game. I really enjoyed it. I feel like I got my time and money's worth out of it just fine, and just everything that they did with that. I believe it was called the Archon, and some of the mystery behind the Scourge. That was great. I liked the cat as an antagonist force. Chrisylum, how about you?
Well, I think in terms of Andromeda, a lot of it was just expectations. I think people were, after coming off the back of the trilogy, even visually it looked a little different too. It just stylized. It didn't look like an evolution of the Mass Effect series. And,
yeah, and it didn't really play as one either, but...
No, but it was still... But I think it was totally expectation, because I remember when Inquisition came out, and it was funny to hear you go on about Dragon Age 2, because that was the one Dragon Age I just couldn't get into. Where the first Dragon Age I loved.
Yeah, no,
second I just couldn't get into. But Inquisition, I didn't even think I would like it, but I just fell into it, and I really enjoyed it. But a lot of people I know were just like, Inquisition was a disappointment.
No, Dragon Age 1 was really good. Dragon Age 2 had some problems, and then I can see people's arguments about Dragon Age Inquisition. But yeah, for me, 2, which is so weird, because usually the DLC is frowned on. It's not really... all of its extra fluff that they cut out and they want to make an extra buck on. I mean, I've got a lot of negative feelings towards DLC as a whole right now, but that particular one with the tower for Dragon Age 2, I'd have to look up the exact name of what it was. But
I think it's different if you have expectations for something going in. For example, Breath of the Wild, it's an incredible game. I got a Switch day one just to play that.
Yep. And
I even took some time off from work to play it. Played the hell out of it. Only thing I didn't do was collect all the Korok seeds. I think I got well over 100 of them, but there was no way I was going to get the rest.
You're going to get the little gold poop?
Yeah, once I saw it, I was like, that's not worth it. I did all the shrines, and I enjoyed it. But the funny thing was, I kind of had a backlog at the time, and Horizon Zero Dawn I hadn't yet played. So I can't remember if I played. I think I played Breath of the Wild first, or it may have been I played Persona right before that or after that, Persona 5.
Yeah.
But then I remembered, I have Horizon Zero Dawn I need to play. I feel like in some ways, even after totally loving and going through Zelda and enjoying my time, that I almost liked Horizon Zero Dawn a bit more. And it was a shorter game. But it felt a little more complete to me. I felt a little more like the characters and like the relationship you have with, I can't remember if it was your father or your caretaker or whoever cares for you, and you're kind of like a little girl, and you get older, and it just, I don't know, it felt like a more complete story to me, and I just don't know if it was the production value, but something really struck a chord where that year everybody was, Breath of the Wild, best game ever. I can't deny that it was an awesome Zelda game.
It was.
But is it my favorite Zelda game? I don't know.
I'll be honest, it's not even in my top 3, maybe not even top 5. It's just, I'll be honest, it's too big. It's too intimidating.
No focus, no real story.
Yeah.
Just destroy Ganon.
Yeah, like, maybe you go wake up these 4 beasts if you want to. You don't actually have to. Go get the Master Sword if you want to. You don't have to. You can literally just... I think the world record's done in like 15 minutes or something now.
Jeez.
Or maybe 20 minutes.
I think a lot of it's expectations. I remember when Destiny first came out, and I think people thought it was going to be bigger than that. They thought maybe more, since it was multiplayer, I was thinking maybe more RPG elements, more character growth and development, where it just didn't have that.
Yeah.
But the gameplay was fun. The story was, it was kind of boring having to go to an external site to look up lore. Why couldn't they just inject that in the game?
Yeah, have a codex or something.
All the memes where they're basically, I could tell you about so-and-so, but, hell that I won't.
Yeah.
It just, and then even with 2, I think kind of like expectations, I think kind of started to ruin things.
Well, I mean, Bungie also is coming off of Halo.
Yes,
so.
which I guess I never really truly understood the story of it. Yes, I know there is one there, and I know some people love it to death.
Oh, I love it.
But for me, it was just something I never really tapped into. But I think people expecting something like that.
And I just want to make a quick point on Survient. It's like, yeah, people are hating on DLCs and saying like, oh, this should have been the main game that was cut out 3 later. But I'm going to go to Code Sword 2, Knights of the Republic 2. A DLC would have made that game so much better. It would have actually given it an ending. It would have given us a lot more to it that was obviously cut out because Obsidian did not have time to finish it. DLC made New Vegas a lot better. Again, Obsidian getting some more time.
Yeah, most of the Fallout 4 even, love it or hate it. Far Harbor, I really enjoyed Far Harbor.
Yeah.
Also Nuka World, I mean, for what it was, I enjoyed it because of the characters, the feel.
Yeah, no, I mean, there definitely are some diamonds in the rough when it comes to DLC. But kind of, for the NPC angle of this, some of the discussions you're talking about, what is your take and feeling on games with not heavy story, but the story is not an afterthought, but that don't have any NPCs in them? I'll kick off with an example. That came to my mind was a game called Transistor, an indie game. You're sitting there as a female protagonist running around who's lost their voice, so they can't even talk, and so silent protagonist. And your sword weapon thing can talk to you. So aside from the sword, which you're using as a weapon, so I guess it might be considered an NPC. That game I'd largely consider one that does not have any NPCs in it, but it still manages to tell a very strong story through like little things you read or your character doing their internal monologuing. And I think that's still a valid angle that story writers and game developers can come off with.
Well, characters and storytelling, I mean, setting can be a character. I mean, it just... visual aids, cues, just the feeling, the atmosphere, even the music sometimes can just tell a story. It can tell you all you need to know. I guess that's the beauty of storytelling. It's, you can hear it, you can read it, you can see it, and then most of all, you can feel it. So I think there's many different ways you can tell a story without actually telling it through a person. So you don't need somebody narrating the tale or saying, hey, you need to go and do X, Y, and Z. Some games are clever enough, because that's how they had to do it back in the day, like the original Zelda. They didn't really give you too many hints. You just found your way and you stumbled through it, and it's kind of how you did it.
Zelda's one. Also, what many argue would be one of the greatest, if not the greatest games of all time, had literally no speaking characters. Some would argue no non-hostile characters at all, aside from maybe like 3 or 4. Super Metroid.
Super Metroid, that's interesting. I love the Metroid series. The atmosphere, I think, sells it. Like earlier today, we were talking about Dead Space.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Dead Space has some pivotal things that are considered bad, but for the most part, there's no... I wouldn't say there's a centralized villain, per se, and even though you could hypothetically relate it to, like, one thing, or an ultimate thing, for the most part, it's the atmosphere, it's being alone, it's like, it's you in a foreign place and you don't know what's going on. Space always seems to work the best because it's space people can hear you scream, and it's supposed to be alien, and the unknown is around that corner. So I think it kind of works. But yeah, I can see that with Super Metroid, because they don't really hold your hand. I mean, they sometimes give you visual cues.
Yeah.
Like if you can't go back, you can only go this way, and then maybe you get a power. It's like, oh, this power lets me destroy these blocks, so now I can go further.
Or jump or swing or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Best example, I think that would be was Mega Man X, where they didn't you play. I mean, it's just like their tutorial is just you experiencing and doing it without over-explaining it. There's no exposition.
Insert Egoraptor, whatever.
Exactly.
Mega Man X here. Yeah.
Yes. It's just there's a way that you can direct people without having to have hey, press up to do this. I mean, most of us know that by now. I mean, the context clues. I mean, yes, I suppose that's what a manual is for, but or depending on the age of the target audience of it, or maybe if it's a newfangled control thing Nintendo's been working on, like a Mario Party game where it's like, how the hell do I do this?
Or Let's Go, Pikachu and Eevee.
Exactly. But I think you can have story elements without actually, in a traditional sense, telling a story.
Yeah.
But I think that depends on the beholder. Some people like to be told a story, and then some people like to find the story and piece it together.
Exactly.
Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, a lot of the 90s, I don't even know what type of game they'd be considered. I guess an adventure game. Jimmy, Argati, Mist-driven, that kind of thing?
Oh, the point, like...
Yeah, point-and-click adventure.
Point-and-click adventures. Some of
Or
those,
puzzles.
zero dialogue and plenty of story to tell.
I was never a huge fan of Myst, but I know everybody who was, and they loved it.
Yeah.
And I think maybe part of the charm was, it's almost in your head. It's like good horror storytelling where I'm not telling you everything. It's just the dread I'm building up. It's your imagination and what you perceive that evil thing lurking to be. That's unique to you. It's what scares you. It's like no matter what horrible stuff I could write down, your own dread and anticipation of that, I think, is what's going to affect you the best.
Yep.
All right, so kind of flipping that around again. For tabletop setting or any kind of thing you've had to run as a dungeon master or equivalent, for you as a storyteller in that capacity, for your NPCs, what's the most important things?
Spontaneity and being able to improvise. I had either the curse or the blessing of playing with interesting people.
Yep.
Now, I wasn't always a DM or a game master, but I played with some unusual people. Chaotic characters were fairly common, as well as lawful, and someone always wants to play the Malkavian. Usually it's me. So learning how to corral people and rein in the story and make it fun for everybody without letting a player kind of dictate how the DM is going to go. So instead of getting irritated and you're supposed to take control of that story and get it back on track. And sometimes you need to do it in a creative way, nudging instead of getting into arguments or whatever else. Sometimes you can take that spontaneity or whatever the feel is that night, and you can work it into the story. You can kind of change things, but that's the job, I think, with Dungeon Master. But I think but it only really works if everybody's really part of that. I think you need to be more focused on that aspect of the game rather than just the brass tacks of this is the module or this is the adventure I wrote for you and you better follow it to a T and we're going to fight about rules and we're going to argue about saving throws and mechanics and movement. And I mean, at the core, that's not what makes the game fun. The one thing that used to kill it for me, or in most games, is just when it gets a little too technical. I guess the new term would be min-maxing. I mean, once you're doing that, it loses a lot of the fun.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, any sort of gaming or the storytelling, it's all about the experience, the enjoyment. Otherwise, it'd be almost like telling yourself a story, which I don't probably wouldn't be a sane thing to do, and probably wouldn't be too fun.
No. For myself, yeah, spontaneity is a bit of it, but I like my, at least foreign NPCs to be, somewhat impressive, kind of stick in players' minds. I'm in fact running a section right now a campaign right now that hopefully in a few sessions I do get to introduce someone who should stick in the minds really heavily, but Survient will have to tell me if I succeed or not later on. Apparently, if I remember, I really liked a Goliath character that I introduced on the latest Train Murder Mystery session there. But for myself, those are the ones I kind of want, but I'll tell you, some of the just completely random NPCs that our normal DM cold brewer makes up, those are usually really fun. And Survient's got all kinds of weird characters he's made up in his Planeswalker ones that always stick in my mind, like the Modrons, the freaking Brain Gears.
Mm-hmm.
It's all great.
Yeah, so for me, the most important thing, and it's not a required element, I think it's the secret sauce, is as a DM or game master, storyteller, your own engagement of that NPC. If it's an NPC that you can't get into, that you cannot manifest and realize to their, not necessarily full potential, but as close as you can get, they become a forgettable NPC. If you as the creator of the character are forgettable towards the character, then yeah, your player characters, unless they have, you introduce a centaur and one of your players, that's all they're about is centaurs, obviously they're going to remember that, but for the most part, the NPC to them generally is only as important as it is to you. And for me, in hindsight of the campaigns I've run, the stories I've told, that's one thing that I've learned for future sessions, future campaigns that I've made mistakes on. I've got NPCs that I've thrown out that I've totally forgotten about. Sometimes my players remind me of characters I've created. I'm just like, oh, right, I did that character. And
Larry the Llama Suit.
Yeah, for the future, when you're for spontaneity and you're having to pivot because your characters are actually playing the game right and getting creative, I still think it's important in those moments to take the time as a creator and really spend the extra 2 seconds of thought to what character can I get into? What character can I do something with that I, as a creator, will enjoy?
Well, you have to play to your strengths. I mean,
Yeah.
There are some games I certainly wouldn't DM. Most of my experience with DMing was with things that I tend to enjoy. So I liked how Ravenloft could be anything and everything, and the Mists could take you anywhere, and how they were almost a character of their own. And I liked that I could confine people in. There were rules to Ravenloft that I could use as a DM to change things dramatically if anything was going on. And it could be absolutely absurd, or it's like I could almost have free reign to, I could break some normal conventions even if I wanted to. And I think a lot of that probably came from White Wolf, where a lot of the characters that you made, you had to pick certain traits or quirks. And I think you have to give somebody flavor, having that stoic dwarf, dwarf, warrior. That's boring. It's been done before. I mean, if you're emulating a Tolkien character,
it's been done.
It's been done. Give yourself a quirk. Make it more interesting. I think you can make it fun. You can make it humorous.
He's a dwarf that steals beards. Yeah.
You can make it kind of absurd and crazy. Then again, the Malkavians. I mean,
he's a massive tentacles that likes to make everyone trade pants.
Exactly.
Yeah, I see that. I'm kind of sad I never actually got to run a game of Star Wars because I feel like I can make some great NPCs just because I know so much about that.
Oh yeah, the more you know about the universe, the better it becomes.
Yes.
It really does help. And that's the thing is like whether you get engaged or not. It's like for me for a 3.5 on D&D, I read the manual of the planes, and I read that thing all the way through in one sitting without even intending to. It was something that grabbed me and captured me. And if you find things like that where you just can eat it up, as far as content goes, it creates some very interesting scenarios if you're able to create a setting around that. But I think for me, some of the most interesting NPCs are ones that come out of nowhere, that you pseudo-create, but your characters may create, like you have them as just as a throwaway, and then your players turn them into something bigger. For our Guardian me, we had a session we were running, and we had several NPCs that came out from that campaign. The plane and time hopping hobo. Yep. We just threw them out there as a thing, and the characters asked more and more questions about them, and we're just like, well, he gets a coin, and he jumps into dumpsters, and that's how he goes from plane to plane, and that Sticky Joe, and basically it stuck with us, and we never really intended it to be a big character. We were just kind of dialoguing, and we had other things that we came up with that didn't really make too many waves, but came back later, or we tried new angles and created some interesting scenarios.
Yeah, I may in fact be introducing another character from that co-op campaign that me, Survient, and also Cold Brewer also was part of this. Reintroduced that into one of my campaigns here. I already did Sticky Joe, and I think didn't he show up in your planeswalking one too at one point?
I think briefly, but
yeah. But that's all he does is just.
It was a cameo. Yeah, for me that was definitely a cameo. But
same. He's definitely a fun character, and it's always nice to have little ones like that show up occasionally. Chrisylum, have you ever had any ones like that you just keep bringing up, or not really?
I think in the past I have. I remember. I think it may have been a Ravenloft campaign, and I wanted to goof, and there was this kind of like this really huge, burly man. I'd probably think of something like Hagrid from Harry Potter. Absolutely insane, though. But so it's this inn that they went to, or town, and this one character was in the inn. They were also at a glance that that was the bar wench, and so the whole town was run by this one person in costume. And to roleplay that and kind of change my voice around, but make it plainly obvious that this is the same guy doing this, and just kind of messing with everybody, was kind of creative. So I do like to put little humorous or fun things in there.
Yeah. Well, it's fun with that because you can spin that around and then have a town where the player you play it that all the player to the players it seems you drop the hints and everything. It makes it seem obvious that it's the same person every time, and then there's like a big gathering, like town meeting at the end of the day to discuss orcs that are raiding in the mountains.
And they're all different people.
They're all different people from the same thing.
But they all seem to have beards.
Yeah, so for Argati and I, in Cold Brew as well, for our co-op campaign, and by co-op we had multiple TMs, one of the ones we did was loosely based on
Alex Louis Armstrong?
Yeah, Armstrong from Full Metal Alchemist, and we basically made it an entire town, or family, the von Braunsteins, and basically what it is it's this very muscly family, much like how Armstrong's family was.
Aside from one sister, but yeah.
Yeah, we didn't do any exceptions to that. Every single one of them was built like a tank, and it turned out, after the players went around doing discovery, and it was funny because we had our main story we were going for, and we didn't really have too much intention for them to explore too much, but we were prepared if they did, and they did quite a bit. And they discovered that there was a secret steroid smuggling operation going on, and that's exactly how this was going. And then a couple of our characters accidentally became buff themselves through magical means, and hilarity ensued from that.
And then so did some kobolds from the sewers.
Yeah, some of the kobolds too as well. So yeah, it was a lot of fun coming out of that. So kind of trying to bring this all together and wind down a bit. Part of the discussion we had outside of this a little earlier. I'm a little bit out of it because I haven't played it, but I'll just come out and say it. Are there NPCs in Fallout 76?
Yes, there are. There are tons of them, and not just robots. Like I was kind of alluding to earlier, there are tons of, dead people all over the place. You find holotapes with their voice telling you their stories. You find logs in terminals. You find notes everywhere, and you piece together these really elaborate stories of whole groups, whole factions, long winding tales of kidnapping, of betrayal, of love, redemption. Just so many great stories.
Cannibalism.
Yeah, cannibalism. And I haven't even gotten too far now. I'm only level 30. I understand really late game stuff. You find out exactly why every single person is dead. You get hints at it at the beginning that there's a plague that's converted everyone into these being called the Scorched, but there's deeper stuff than that apparently that I need to find.
Yeah. I think that's the difference. I think in a traditional sense, people expect NPCs to be a living, breathing character in the world that has a personality, and they're in front of you, and they have their hair color, and what their face looks like, and their eyes, and their emotions, and everything's in present tense. Where Fallout, the same story exists. There are characters, plots. It's through the holotapes, it's through the notes, it's through the messages. It's through the visual elements that are kind of hidden around.
Yeah.
But not everybody consumes or wants to consume the game in a certain way. And I understand it's a departure, and it's different from previous Fallout games. And I get that, and I understand it, and that may not be their, may not float their boat. But for me, it was kind of what I was expecting, and I'm not disappointed in that. I know there's all sorts of things going on with Fallout 76.
There are tons of problems right now with it,
but I think that isn't necessarily what's hurting the game. I don't think it's a bad idea, and nothing says that they couldn't introduce other characters later on.
I've myself found one. I believe there's 3 unopened vaults in the game so far.
It's like even going back to Zelda, where as much as I can enjoy Breath of the Wild, it's not my favorite Zelda game, and I don't think I would want to play another Zelda game that was a copy of Breath of the Wild. I almost want to see another stylized different style, Wind Waker, or, I want them to do what they've continually done with Zelda, is to innovate.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the same story. Yes, it's the same premise almost every time. But it's the style, it's the visuals, it's the retuning of the music a bit, the elements, like even Skyward Sword, which very, game that polarizing.
Yes.
I found a way to enjoy it by the time I was done playing it. Yes, it felt different, the waggly controls, but once you started getting hooked into it, it was like any other Zelda. I mean, but that's what I've come to expect, and that's what keeps Zelda fresh for me. If everything looked and was told the same, if every Fallout game was the same as Fallout 1 and 2, I don't know how much I would enjoy that. I loved the original Fallout. I loved Fallout 2. Fallout 3 was a complete departure from that. But it's not like Fallout was really going to do anything if Bethesda hadn't swooped in and taken it. And they introduced a lot, and they took some things away, but it's kind of the evolution of the series, and I think that 76 is a good way to, if you enjoyed Fallout 4, you enjoyed Fallout 3 or New Vegas, and, you're moving to like Fallout 5. It's a good experimental way, I think, to give you a taste of something that you're going to enjoy for a while, where they can be a little more creative, and kind of just test things around. I don't know how that works as far as selling it for a $60 game goes.
Yeah.
But it's almost like it's a playground. And I think it gives an opportunity to test a lot of weird ideas. So that hopefully when, Fallout 5, probably 10 years from now, will probably be a radically different game. And maybe some ideas that they may have had moving forward, maybe they can say, oh, well, this will work, this won't work, or maybe some things that they conceptualize in Fallout 76 are better in some ways. For one, I like the card and perk system. It's not perfect. I think it needs some tweaking, but I kind of like being limited towards what I can have available.
Yeah.
I like that it's flexible. But I like that it's not that I can just keep dumping points in. I'm not like level 200 and have my entire special maxed. But I do like being able to, I'll say I want to invest these points here, but I only want to do that for crafting. Yeah. I don't have to carry that with me all the time. I can put it away, or you can leave it out there. I mean, it's an interesting way of playing it, and I think it maybe needs it, because I think the only way Fallout 3, going from 4 and then to kind of evolve, is it needs some fresh ideas, some just crazy things, I think. And I think Fallout 76 is really the only way that they can kind of, test it and see how it shakes out.
Yeah, I agree. Probably $40 would have probably been a better price for this.
Honestly, I hate to say that it costs probably money to do it. I mean, clearly, yes, there's asset flips. Yes, there's some new assets. Clearly, time and energy and money went into this.
Yes.
So I can't say free to play.
No.
But the fact that they even said that, they're not planning on DLCing it necessarily, and they're going to add to it, and they're going to use their Atom Store.
Yeah. Atom Store only for cosmetics. I am happy that they've done that and they've stuck to that. I mean, it's only been a few weeks, but yeah.
I think to realize that, they'll have to fix things like as far as settlement crafting. Some people just want to craft. Some people want to show off their stuff.
Yes.
Settlement build. I think if they grow that more for those players who just want their Fallout Sims experience, I think there's a market to sell them items on the Atom Shop. So I think the game needs to really figure out what it is, but it is definitely more of an experiment. I think at best it was always meant to be sort of an early access game. I just think that the way it was marketed was this solid experience, $60 game you're jumping into, we have collector's editions for it. I don't think it needed all of that. I think it should have just been I think it could have been a lower price, and I think I don't think the expectation was set necessarily too high, but I think that fundamentally, I think people were kind of expecting something bigger with more grandeur than what it really is, or attempting to do.
Yeah, which kind of confused me because when I saw it initially, my expectations were through the floor. It wasn't until I started seeing videos from like Oxorn, from Mini a True Nerd, stuff like that, that I actually got a little excited for it and decided to pick it up, and I've been enjoying it ever since. And again, back to the NPCs, I honestly think it is brilliant that they don't have quest-giving NPCs in there, with a couple of exceptions, like there's a few robots that do, but everyone always talks about like Fallout 3, oh, we have all these unnecessary, essential NPCs. You kill them, they just pop right back up. People complain about that, but they would have needed that for 76 with a multiplayer game where that would have been yet another avenue for people to grief. And like I said, I just think it's brilliant that they got around it this way, that through holotapes, through terminal entries, things like that, you get the quests.
I can't think of too many games that have done it. I mean, there's been some games where you've been isolated and Dead Space, for example. Everybody's dead on Nishimura, and you have holotapes and logs and people you're talking to from far away, but no one. You're pretty much alone in space on that ship.
Yeah, well, like even Doom 3, the same idea.
Yeah. Same idea.
I think it starts with a few people alive and then they're dead very quickly.
I mean, the concept's been around, but for them to kind of double down on it the way they did, from what would be considered, I guess, a traditional Bethesda Elder Scrolls game.
Yeah.
Turn, Fallout, that style, I think that was the expectation. Especially coming off the back of, I mean, Fallout 4 was the most recent, but then, Skyrim had a resurgence and everything, but,
yeah.
I think it's new ground for them. It's kind of treacherous.
It is.
But I don't necessarily think it's a terrible thing. Obviously, there's issues they need to address.
Obviously, yes.
And I hope they do. But I'm curious to see where it goes from here. But I definitely think there are some merits and there's fun to be had. But it's definitely, I can see it not being for everyone.
No, it's definitely not. If you're not into the whole crafting survival type game like Rust, Forest, Ark, Minecraft, things like that, definitely probably should give this game a pass. Maybe watch someone play through it for a while, see if you maybe enjoy it. But for people that just want to go around, kill other people, do stuff like that,
you'll get bored of it pretty quick, I would assume.
Yeah,
it's just not. I mean, I've seen some people too where they race through, and I mean, maybe they have read every single note in every holotape, but I have my doubts on that too. But I think it just depends how you play those games. For example, Fallout, I've played it multiple times, and I've sunk well over probably 800 hours into Fallout 4 alone. I've done every single faction, every single DLC. I've played multiple different characters. I've messed around with settlements. And even to this day, when I've looked at it, I always seem to find something new that I haven't seen before, or a new quest that I somehow missed. And it still kind of amazes me that I can get that much out of it, but, I have to kind of seek it out. I have to give myself objectives.
Yep.
And that's what it's really about. And that's what I kind of like in certain games where it's not just a one and done, linear progression system and ride from, start to finish. Sometimes I like the freedom to explore and, kind of that, the whole thing. I think that kind of boils down to role playing in general is the having some imagination, and just being part of it. I mean, some days you could just horse around. You could, fart around or say, "Hey, I'm going to go to every single train station today," or "I'm going to find every single red rocket," or I haven't even seen this monster yet that I heard about. I'm going to see if I can find it.
Yep.
Or, I think there's... But for some people, that's not how they want to consume their entertainment, because it could be considered work.
Yeah.
Where sometimes I feel that I am in the mood for that sort of experience, but sometimes the opposite can feel forced. But sometimes I kind of want to not have a clear objective.
Yeah, just take some time, just got off work, I want to mess around for a little bit.
Yeah, I want to go see if I can find some lead to make some more bullets.
Yep. Find some more plastic for some shotgun shells.
There you go.
Alright, well, this has been Survient.
This is Argati.
Chrisylum.
And thank you guys for watching this, and expect more, maybe of this, although if you didn't like it, feel free to let me know. I probably won't be going back to Warframe for a while, though. Sorry. So, yeah, this is Argati, signing out.